Watch Doors of Perception, now on Amazon Prime.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts, you have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials. The systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is James True. Be sure to watch Doors of Perception. That's available now on Amazon Prime. Check that out. Leave us a positive rating and review. Also, we're booking guests for July. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show James True. He is an author and philosopher whose work pushes the boundaries of philosophy, mythology, and consciousness. James, welcome back. How you doing?
Great. How about yourself?
Excellent, man. Looking forward to this. I really enjoy our discussions, and today I wanted to get your thoughts on the emergence of these modern Gnostic interpretations of the nature of reality. I know when I started to become aware of the depth of programming and illusion that we participate with, it brought me to a pretty dark place for a little while. And I imagine this is happening for many people right now, especially if they're just starting to become aware of these things. And I can understand why they may feel like we're on an archonic prison planet, loose form. Like I said, I've been there, but I couldn't stay there. I've always felt that there's much more to it, which we're going to get into today. And this is a big topic, but before we get into this, remind the audience just a little bit about yourself and let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, my name's James. I run a loose farm. I collect I'm a writer. I'm on my 7th book. I do a live stream, but mostly I focus on writing. My latest book is Black Eye Club, which deals with the ability that the eye is a wound itself. So we're seeing into a realm that is causing us pain, and the better we get at seeing pain, the more clearly we see the reality that we have now. So that's kind of my shtick right now. We can get right back into the topic, but yeah, that's basically who I am, and that's what I do. So great to be here.
And I do want to explore a little bit of what you're writing about in the Black Eye Club as well. But where I'd like to start today is, do you notice more people aligning with these kind of dark Gnostic beliefs?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, I think I've noticed it a while, and I've tried to entertain it as much as I can because, quite frankly, part of what I do requires me to talk about ideas that other people find interesting. And I've always been on the outskirts, pushed aside, because I don't have the same kind of outlook as those have. However, as someone who's studied Gnosticism, for example, I've actually did a presentation on this over why it was so dark initially, why it's so important for people to feel this idea of a loose farm or a prison planet. In my mind, this is the emergence of a different matrix, or a different bandwidth, I should say, of understanding. Our feelings are maybe best understood as fieldings, as emotional electricity, and that over time our frontal lobe had to develop enough calories, enough juice to even be able to interpret emotions as being separate from the psyche. I'm talking about a time where you would enter into an animalistic type state, and you would not necessarily know that you were having emotions. You were the emotion, right? And so over time, we learned to separate ourselves from these things, to hold on to our conscious center, as it were, and to start to notice that our conscious center had an emotional weather to it. So my interpretation, Chris, is, quite frankly, if this isn't too advanced or too wordy, I should say, is that in my mind, this is the emotional world coming online. And it looks like this world that's being described in this prison planet-y kind of Aleutish way. It's accurate, but it's more, in my opinion, it's more accurate to our own fielding state, to our own presence and our own understanding of the world around
Mm.
us.
So maybe we could go back to our ancient past as far as your understanding goes. Were we always in this dreamlike state? Were we always unaware and disconnected from our true emotional state? Or was there something that came along, an etheric parasite? Maybe we did it to ourselves.
In my mind, the biggest catalyst for human consciousness is actually our bicameral state. That a long time ago, something clever inside of us decided that if it could create two of the same thing and have them run alongside each other, this would be a more accurate way of surviving in the world. And this comes about not just by you having two arms, but by you having two lobes to your brain. The bicameral mind is a theory that the first mental steps that we took were from this lobe-centric state. The left brain was its own self. The right brain was its own self. And the corpus callosum, the connecting tissue that connects the two lobes, takes thousands of years to connect to itself. And during that period, you're watching a consciousness, a bicameral consciousness come online in a place where it wasn't before. I think that both minds were hearing goats, not trying to be dramatic, but literally voices in their own heads, and that this voice was the other mind reaching through to the other side. As we practice this bicameral state, our consciousness became more polarized. One brain became more dominant because it was just helpful. One became more submissive because it was helpful. So you have the intuition and the extuition, if we could just use that word for now, your egoic self, that those two things became intuition and extuition because of the attrition between the two lobes. That over time they realized that you and I can work better if one of us is the dominant and the other is the subordinate. So your intuitive voice got softer over time, and your egoic voice got louder over time. And I believe that this is who we are now. That that where we are right now is not an end state. It is a transitory state that we're watching as the bicameral mind is becoming more polarized and more just footed in itself, so to speak. This flipping can be seen through the frontal lobe stretching to the front and the hindbrain or the midbrain stretching to the back. You have two different systems. One is a time machine that looks in the past. Your spirit animal is constantly adding all the pain that you've ever endured and telling yourself, never fucking step there, never put this fire in your mouth, never put this spear up your butt. You know, all the lessons that we've learned, the hindbrain is remembering all the pain. That's sort of like your backwards time machine. It's only looking at where you've been. And then you have this other brain that's only looking to where it thinks you could go, the Promethean frontal lobe, the place of placebo, the place of fantasy, the place where we lie. All of these things are our future self trying to cast itself into the future using the wisdom of the past. And I'm just describing to you how that bicameral mind turned elongated and it went into an extuitive frontal self and an intuitive receptive self. And this is what our personalities are. So all the feelings that we have now, which are much more complex than they've ever been, are simply the field states, the relationships that the two lobes have between each other. And the more comfortable we become with our feelings, the more we're able to utilize the equipment in our cockpit and navigate a clearer reality.
What do you think it looked like for humanity before we had this split that you were just discussing? What would that human essentially be like?
Yeah, great question. So if you don't have a strong extuition, then I think you're looking at like an outward self. You're looking at something more akin to like a beast of burden kind of concept where you've got a bull, right? It's like an 800-pound, 1,200-pound bull, and a 1x4 is keeping it inside of a pen. that it doesn't take much, even though they're super powerful, that the bicameral early man, and I don't need to call it bicameral because bicameral is its own study. I'm just trying to kick that off. But early man was a less violent, still dangerous, but a less extuitively violent creature. He was more animistic. I think the word serf, a serf, would be about as close as you could come to understanding that now, Chris. The idea that it's not a slave, but there's these people that they're sort of autonomous, but they really just came grounded in the land. And if you bought property and it had serfs on it, it's sort of like you're buying a bunch of mushrooms that are already growing there. And by law, you're required to allow them to grow. So it's that kind of mentality where the individual hasn't risen out of the just the contextual environment themselves. They don't even necessarily know. I'm not even speculating here. If you go back into early cave art, early archaeological art, man is expressed last through painting. Second to last is landscape, which means the very first things we were drawing were things that attracted us limbically, the bison, the animals, these things that we ate, these things that we hunted. Everything else, in my opinion, because I can't prove this, we don't have any autopsy records of what the brain actually looked like back then. But from my understanding, if you're looking at early man, you're not looking at someone that even saw the same reality we do, Chris. That you and I see the landscape and we think it's a thing. We actually think it's this place and we call it a planet, and or some of us call it a planet, whatever. And we have dirt on it and all this other stuff. But the early man did not even have the contextual understanding of separating himself from that thing. This is kind of what you see in species. A lot of species have this sort of similar kind of consciousness. They look autonomous, but they're not really. They're more just grounded into the land. So this early man was much tamer, much more animistic. When you look back at Rome and you're like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, every month we're having a giant phallus run down the street. A bunch of people are running, chasing after it, raping women, and we're just calling this society. And that's called Lupercalia or Bacchanalia or all the other studies. This is, I think, just our early mental state. We're just seeing traces of that. It was much more animistic, meaning that it was almost like playtime on a kindergarten in the playground where you kind of lose yourself because you're having so much fun. I want you to picture that, but just older with the ability to practice violence. I think that's really probably what early man looked like. And it even went into their vision too. I'll stop now because I'll keep talking, but even the colors they saw were much different than we see now, like much different.
Did we go from that to having these spiritual beliefs that included gods and external entities and beings after this split from our consciousness? And are these beings a creation like egregores from our own emotion and energy?
I think what really propelled us the most is the concept of hypothetical. If you're hearing a voice that's not in your head, but it's next to your head, so it's if your left lobe is talking to your right lobe and you are hallucinating the auditory signal, which is what a voice in your head is, you're hearing yourself think, that thinking is probably just coming from the other lobe, and you're broadcasting as an auditory signal because you just want to hear it. That's all. So you're just giving the voice in your head. It's really not a voice, is it? It's more of a chemical squeeze, really. And we turn that chemical squeeze into a voice. So back then, when you have two lobes that are equal, I don't think there was a lot of intuitive voices because you didn't have a self to even think that there was a voice. You just would just hear sounds. You wouldn't necessarily know who was what. This is what I mean by beast of burden kind of mentality. Like if you picture a bear, super powerful, if you bang two pots together, the bear's like, oh my God, and it runs away. Like it's like super powerful, but it runs away because it does not have this egoic self, this sort of like stabilized consciousness that's able to interpret, hey, that's just a loud sound. I don't need to bug out. I'm much more powerful. So this early mind lacked a lot of these tools, a lot of these skills. And one of those skills was the ability to abstract, the ability to conceptualize and say, this creature is running this way, and it has a trajectory of X and a speed of Y, and it will make it to this point at Z. this learning of trajectory and the teaching of two brains competing with voices is actually teaching us the ability to abstract, to hypotheticalize. Our neurons are able to compute things that haven't happened yet. This is a big deal. This is the birth of God because it's the verse of the hypothetical. The invention of the, Chris, the word the, it really says it all, because the tree, the house, the keys, the coffee, these are hypotheticalizing a conceptual notion. And this is such a big, huge advancement in us that we didn't have before. And as it came online, we called it God. Theism, think about it. The word theism is just the ism. It is the worship of thee. So it's really the hypothetical objective construct is a skill, a platonic skill that our phonological loop, you could call it that, a part in our mind that has the ability to abstract space, that by doing that, you have no choice but to invent God too. That it just comes with the territory, because the hypothetical is now a new realm that hasn't existed before. And that hypothetical needs to have some sort of face to it. And that face to it is what we call God.
Well, going a little deeper into the thought forms or egregores, if you look in our modern age, we have the paranormal field, which includes what people understand as ghosts, spirits, aliens, extraterrestrials. Would these also be considered manifestations of our consciousness that kind of took on lives of their own, and maybe there's an ecosystem of it out there now?
Yeah. Yeah, that's personally where I'm at. I when I look at the true meaning of even what Jesus is, believe it or not, is as a necromancer, someone who was able to see the demonology that others could not. That's really all that word means. So you have someone that's able to see the emotional body of someone in a world where other people could not see the emotional body of that person. And we just call that Christianity. We call it compassion. But if you understand, compassion is just a sonar. It's just the ability to look at someone and to see themselves as a reef. You and I are just reefs. We're being occupied by agency. The agency is our neurological competitive army that has built what's called a Zeus, right? A singular form would just be all of the agency, the neurological agency in yourself, deciding and forcing itself to follow one central leader. And this leader we would call the ego or the joystick of the self or whatever. I don't need you to say it's ego. I'm just saying it's some sort of conceptual idea of what we call the self. And that this concept, this is the uber us inside of our form. And as this form, we're learning to understand that our feelings themselves are animized, i.e. alive, i.e. ghosts, in our machine. Addiction, alcoholism, trauma, PTSD, hauntings, bad memories that we're having trouble being cheated on. All these things are creating emotional algorithms that live in our reef like fish in a reef. They occupy our bones. More importantly, they literally, I personally think that smell, olfactory, is all these things. So when I'm telling you these things, Chris, I want you to know that I physically feel like I have the chemistry to back this up, that the olfactory chemosignals, our smells, the pheromones, some of you might know that word. This is really the possessive nature of all demons. The smells that occupy us are a kind of haunting, and that this haunting is just chroma colors, which is just DNA codons. So it's just the colors of your DNA are just smells. And these smells are occupying you and possessing you. And this is the egregore of really who you are. You are one giant possession that you call the self. And within that self, it is multiplex full of separate possessions. Who your mom thinks you should be, who society thinks you should be, who your wife thinks you should be, who your kids think you should be. All these would be different egregores living inside the same reef occupying the same space and insisting that they are the ones that is in charge or has the identity of the whole place, which is kind of healthy. You want a fish to feel autonomous. You want an eel to feel autonomous. And this, all the egregores that we see are just simply a very healthy reef expressing itself. So to close this up, in my mind, if you're not possessed, something's wrong with you. Like in my mind, if there's not a ghost, right, that's occupying your shell, you're probably not online, that there's probably more of a sign that something's going wrong.
Would you say that what has been occurring is a natural state of human evolution, that we may be going in the right way? Essentially, it just looks really weird.
Yeah, I think if you imagine what it feels like to be a philodendron, just anything that grows, I just pick philodendron. But if you imagine what it's like to be a philodendron and you're watching it, if you could speed time up, I'd like you to pretend just for a moment that you're hearing the plant scream. That as it's being stretched, right, as it's being pulled longer than it's ever been before, as it's being insisted that no, you can go all the way up here, that the sound it's making inside is, oh, fuck. It's a painful experience to grow. Not painful in a negative, it's evil way, but in a limbic loudness kind of a way, right? That this has a lot of amperage to it that causes me to grow. So most of our emotional timbre that we feel in the world, the emotional things that we call caustic or too loud, most of those, in my opinion, are simply growth spurts, that we're just expressing the natural geography that changed. Our terrain changed. We became more perforated, believe it or not. We'll skip that term for now, but believe it or not, we became more perforated with light, which means that the universe is able to inform us more than we've ever been before. And it kind of feels like rape. It just kind of does. It just feels that way. And so we insist that the world is out to get us because it feels that way, because we are being stretched in a place where we would never consciously, personally stretch ourselves. It took the environment to encourage us to stretch in order to survive. And this is what every philodendron goes through every single day. The difference is we do not emote what they are going through the same way we emote what each other is going through, which is the same thing, I think.
Right on. Well, let's deconstruct some woo-woo concepts that people hear and probably dismiss right away, but I know that there is something to it because I've experienced it myself. First of all, the power of perspective and how this can manifest certain outcomes in your life. I had a perfect example of this yesterday. I told you I got in a wreck, a little fender bender. Well, it was funny. When it happened so fast. All I know was that my truck hit a car and I had something explode into my face. The seconds following, I had this rush of feelings that I used to have in my early 20s, teenager, when I was royally fucking up life, when I was probably drinking and driving. I probably got into a couple of fender benders because I was doing something stupid. And all those feelings immediately came back for like a split second. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to jail. It's all over. And then I just started to slow down, look around, and realize, wait, I was doing everything right. Somebody hit me. And they had witnesses across the street saying that they saw everything. And it was such a strange feeling to have that quick flip in perspective, because I've been living my life pretty damn well. I'm in a really good state right now. My life's going pretty damn well, so I really didn't have anything to be worried about. But to have that split-second experience of being brought back to that stupid teenager and where I was then compared to where I'm at now, it was an incredible feeling, and I was just grateful after that. But it carries over into everything I do, and it really propels me in a certain direction and brings good things to my life if I have a good perspective on things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just to find a way to talk about it, I refer to it as posture. And that when you have the proper posture in life, everything that happens to you is going to take less calories than if you had a poor posture. And so if the calories are there, you're going to be generous. And if the calories are not there, you're going to be selfish and cruel. And so in my mind, the entire world levels up when our posture improves. The entire world levels down when our posture devolves. But it's a little bit more complicated than that because your posture is a strategic form of survival. So I'm not here to say you have shitty posture, you got to fix it. I'm here more to just look at how our posture is a requirement for us to interpret our signal. It's kind of like an antenna. If your antenna is looking like a question mark, if it's curled over, then you're only going to be attracting questions. So doubt will be something that's attracted to you. If you are like an exclamation point, you're only going to be collecting exclamations, things that excite you, things that propel you forward. So two people are in the same room. One is crouched, one is sitting up straight, and they're living in two different realities in the same space. In my mind, this is actually the true nature of reality. Reality is not objective as we think it is. The deeper what's really happening is that reality is a source signal that each of us kind of interpret based on the amount of comfort that we can find interpreting it more precisely. So the closer we look, the higher in radiation the truth comes in, the more it burns our eyes out, and the more prone we are to look less. So you're looking at a bunch of different people that are living in the same chemistry, but they have a different aperture, they have a different posture. And because of that, they're able to see more of the picture or less of the picture. Those who can see more of the picture are going to be able to create a better simulation for themselves. In other words, a better equation to, propel themselves further and will do better. And those who do not will have a weaker equation that will lead to more denigration. And if you just add these up moment after moment after moment after moment, and it's easy to see how destiny really plays a vital role based on where your spine is, based on where your posture is. So in my mind, it really comes down to all of it comes down to electrical calories. How prepared are you for being hit from behind in a vehicle? Do you have all your ducks in a row where as soon as you do, when your state starts to shake, your higher assemblage point is removed because you're hit, something surprises you, you've been taken out of the power seat, which is that I have control over all things. So something has occurred that hasn't. You instantly go into the keep of your castle, which means what's the last stable state that I have where it felt like I could make it? Maybe that was in your 20s, I'm just saying, but we instantly run into a lower state. This is called shock. So, if you fall into a body of cold water, your core shuts down and it just keeps you warm inside. So you're in your keep for a while. So our assemblage point basically collapses. We become a smaller universe because we're just trying to save something, whatever it is we can save. So ultimately, all the trauma that we have is going to obliterate our outer walls and cause us either to retreat, which is very necessary sometimes. This doesn't mean you're not living right, but also sometimes to expand. And how much you expand or retreat is more of a strategy, and that strategy can get you in a lot of trouble. And we're living in society that's learned how, in my opinion, we're living in society that's learned how to constantly divest itself, to constantly be removing the expansion, that we feel safer if all of us are living in a state of questioning. A lot of us feel better off. I think it's because we kind of get on the pit. We're on our stomachs now. We're crawling around in our bellies because we don't know the truth. And we're just more protected. Our most vital organs are facing the ground. So even our slouched posture, I think, is a strategic form of self-defense. So I think a lot of us are crouching and it's kind of embarrassing. I wish that we'd stand up taller, but I also really respect and understand that this is just nature doing what it can with the amount of calories it has. And we're just watching a new kind of creature. I really do see that. A new kind of creature come online in a world that has a different sun, a different level of sunspots, which means there's more clarity to the light. There's less sunspots. So there's like a clearer signal. That clear signal is burning a lot of our ears. Many of us are looking for mass exodus. We have the Spanish flu, we have World War II, we have World War One. We have all these opportunities that are given for people to mass exit from the greenhouse because it's just too much information. But overall, it seems to me what's happening is there's a lens of consciousness that is growing wider as we grow. And that this is causing what feels like a lot of pain, what feels like a lot of slavery, what feels like a lot of enslavement. And it would be how any plant would feel inside of a greenhouse, where the greenhouse is insisting that you can be taller. insisting that you could yield more crystals. Man, there's more buds. You've got it. And you were the plant, and you're just like, dude, why are you making this happen to me? It feels that
Yep.
way. It feels that way because that's how the jungle feels. This is how every single plant in the jungle would feel, especially if they did not have the emotional posture to understand what's happening to them. Because in my mind, you can level up, you can have a different relationship with yourself, and all what I call vitriol that the world's giving you is actually a belief in you. It's actually believing in your timber. It's giving you more stress because it knows you'll grow farther from that than you would if you didn't have it. So it's sort of like we're kind of spoiled teens that are mad that our parents are trying to discipline us sometimes. That's really more of a closer look at I think, how we're seeing this place. We've lost really the wonder of it. This is an amazing, amazing, perfect realm. I don't mean perfect in a candy cane way. I literally mean that every single thing has been accounted for here, like every single thing. And so in my mind, it's hard for me to call this world broken because so much profundity has been done to make sure that it's vitriol based, that you're always growing, that even when things are the shittiest, that there's still conscious growth happening all around you. We see this because we're no longer bicameral. We see this because we have society. We see this because people mow their lawns. The amount of thought that it would take to go out and chop every single piece of grass to a certain height. I hear you that it's insanity, but it's also a sign of having a more saturated consciousness that doesn't just exist inside the body, but exists inside the yard, their house, their kids, their business. So it's sort of like a lichen that would spread on a rock. And this to me is a healthy lichen. So all these things that we see, the ego that we grow, all these things are healthy things. They're just kind of intense is all because it's the jungle.
Right on. This might get into the Black Eye Club a bit, but people look at the power structure, especially a lot of people just waking up, questioning reality, and they get into the occult, ritualistic aspects of some of the parasitic ruling class and what they're into. And it brings a sense of helplessness. Oh, these guys are communing with demons. They're trying to bring about the end of the world. All of these powerful prophetic concepts that have been really resurfacing now. But I don't think they have that power. Many believe that they're going to either bring about the end of the world or some sort of technological disaster that's going to bring about Terminator or AI destruction, all these imminent dangerous things that people in the quote-unquote conspiracy community often discuss. What would you tell them about the true nature of these people in charge of things?
So I've learned the hard way that I have to just let them feel that way because it's helpful. They find it constructive to feel that way. And I think it's really akin to a scarecrow, to be honest with you. And I don't know if everyone even understands the technology of a scarecrow, because a scarecrow is obviously something that's fake, that's meant to scare crows away. But I think it's more of an analogy of what we do. If you and I are afraid of cancer, which is kind of scary, but you and I could instead be afraid of Jason chasing people in the woods with a knife. And a lot of those people are females that have heaving breasts and they trip over roots and they're wearing Daisy Dukes pants. You and I have just created a scarecrow. We've created something to be terrified of that is limbically more pleasing, that is not exactly the same threat, that has nowhere near the same percentage of happening to us, that doesn't have any of the same kind of things that threaten us, but still intrinsically looks scarier than the thing that we're really not comfortable with. In this case, let's say, is cancer. So we don't want to look at cancer. So we take Jason and we put him in a mask, Freddy Krueger, and we put him in front of the cancer. And now we don't see it. We don't see it because our consciousness is able to focus on this scarecrow we've created. Now, in my mind, this is not a flaw. In my mind, this shows you how fucking brilliant our consciousness is, that it's able to, believe it or not, it's able to utilize neuromelanin to literally black out the signal of things. if it's too uncomfortable. Your amygdala listens. It senses how how parasympathetic or how sympathetic you go, excuse me, where you enter into shock, you're not digesting, your saliva shuts down, you're ready for fight flight. And that when it does that, it instantly starts to cut off the amount of dopamine that goes to your eyes. When your eyes have less dopamine, they stop rendering such a vivid picture. When you stop rendering such a vivid picture, you are not fully immersed in the world, which gives you more calories to fucking run. You're not as afraid of the world anymore. So there's a big clutch that's happening. There's a clutch inside your consciousness that we as scientists, I'm not a scientist, but I'm saying that the scientists don't necessarily even admit to yet. I can show you all the signs that it's there, but we do not talk about it in just the standard vernacular is all. I'm not trying to suggest I've invented something that no one else has seen. I just think that I just have the language tools to talk about something that we just haven't been talking about is all. There's sort of an aperture of consciousness. This aperture is going to allow you to see things that, quite frankly, are too terrifying for other people to see. This is where I talk about the people that are in charge now. The people that are in charge have a capacity to see things that are more terrifying than you and I can. You and I are sane fucking people. We are not psychopathic. We love puppies and kittens and gingerbread. And because we love those things, we live in a bandwidth that does not allow us to be that psychopathic. We actually find it painful. We would not be able to survive limbically, meaning we would not find enough oxygen inside of a psychopathic lifestyle. There are others that would. Deep water fish. Just deep water. And that those people, they're more shark oriented. They have a more psychopathic consciousness, and that this keeps them away from things like teddy bears and gingerbread, but it also allows them to see giant squid, megalodon, giant fucking apex eagles, like predators that are too terrifying for you and I to process, they can see. So they see a reality that we don't, and we see a reality that they don't. So if you want to ask who's in charge, I think it's you. I think you're the one in charge. However, if we need a world and we need to see this structure, then we're going to say that the person in charge is the one that can see the biggest predator. In my mind, that would be what we think of as the black nobility, psychopathic elite that are running the whole show. And I think this is true. People that are able to see a deeper, more psychopathic reality are going to have a simulation advantage over you, because they're able to see things like that. So I think it's a conscious bandwidth. I think that as you approach the psychopathic, you also lose the teddy bear gingerbread stuff, and you simply lose touch with reality. There's a certain bit of reality you do not connect to anymore. Psychopaths talk about this. It's a kind of depression that they have, where they do not feel that they fit in. In fact, they get so angry when they see someone else finding so much texture in something as simple as a milkshake or something like that. It's like, how fucking dare you pretend? They accuse them of pretending. If you watch the profiles, they'll accuse you of pretending to like something when there's no fucking way you could. This is the mentality. I personally do not think that this would make you in charge. I think it would make you a better predator, hands down. Zero debate about that. But I think it turns you into an addict, and you're living in a world that you're asphyxiating from. In my mind, it's more of a jungle. In my mind, there is no creature that is running the Amazon, the rainforest, that gets to say, I will eat all of you. I mean, we could say that. But really what I look at it as, it's a balanced ecosystem. There's some of the coolest, most amazing stuff in the jungle, and there's some of the evilest, most fucked up shit in the jungle. And so in my mind, in order for the capacity to exist, for us to have a bandwidth that we live in, we would need to have the darkest, most psychopathic people and the most beyonder, higher capacity people. We would have to have both. And you and I, Chris, do not live in a truth movement where we ever get to talk about the beyonders. We only talk about the psychopaths. We only discuss this level. And every time I try and discuss this level, people get mad and they say, how dare you live in this world where there's no such thing as this? And I didn't say there's no such thing as this. I'm saying this proves that there must be these two. And that these two means that why are we wasting all of our time focusing on the psychopathic elite when we could focus on the beyonder elite? The people that are born without social security numbers, the people that are born without birth certificates, the people that would never, ever, ever defame their child by giving it the brand of a UPC code. That there would be people just like this, and they would not exist in society. They would look at you and I and say, you guys are fucking insane. That they would look at us the same way psychopaths look at us, but they wouldn't have a disdain for us. I think they would see us more as potential. These guys got potential. They could learn to see more. If they could grow up, if they could straighten their spines out more, they might be able to get here. I call these beyonders. I think a lot of us are beyonders. Like a lot of us. I think Corona made more beyonders than anything else I've seen. I think 9/11 was a close second. And that this beyonding is a necessary part of evolution. It's the squeezing out and making a higher version of man, basically, more autonomous, more sovereign, more self-centered in a good way, more universally centered in that way.
What you said earlier really resonated with me about how psychopaths are going to naturally gravitate to these positions of power, and people like you and I, we don't really care about any of that. We're happy with, like you said, puppies and gingerbread, and we're cool with that. But they have these groups of people that tend to gravitate to these positions of power, politics, CEOs, things of that nature. And those are the ones that have the advantage in the quote unquote matrix. Get more out of what their life game is, but they have this psychopathic nature to them. So that really resonated with me. But I'd like to tie this to the Black Eye Club and what we were seeing with the very powerful people and the black eyes.
Well, I feel like I always let people down when I tell them this. I was fascinated by the black eye. Why are all these people have a black eye? I still am. And I compassionated it as hard as I could. And the first thing I realized is that I cannot picture the Pope going into an underground ceremony and having someone punch him in the face and call him. I just don't think he'd have the balls to do that. I think he's too weak. I think he's too fucking weak to pull that shit off. I think he'd flinch. I think most of our reflexes would stop us from doing that. And so then I thought, well, what else is it? And I just started playing with that. And it led me into the Eye of Ra, which is the study about what reality really is. Basically, my theory is this. It probably is some sort of injection. It's not a punch. It's some sort of injection in the eye. And the injection in the eye, what would it give you as a world leader? What would you as a psychopath want that no one else would want? And what would you want to publicly initiate yourself and show everyone else that you have it too? And it honestly, I just started studying how the eye works. Because I'm bored sometimes. I'm just like, this is, well, what would you do to the eye? And I found that the eye, all of your dopamine, most of the dopamine that your body makes, which is really, it's not really a happy chemical. It's more of like a currency. So everything that your body wants to do to process information, it needs dopamine to do that. So it's like a chit. It's like a credit or a casino token. And if you don't have any tokens, you can't gamble. So in reality is just your eye gambling all the time. It takes as much money as it can. It tries to paint a picture that it thinks will help you. And then you either survive or you don't. And then it does it again. It does it again. It does it again. Roughly 60 frames a second. Roughly. It's about as much as we can handle. Some of us are maybe 120. The most your chemistry can handle is about 200. So you and I are only seeing maybe 1/5 of the resolution of what we could even render in the world. So what could you stick in the eye? Now, your eye, not only does it have dopamine, it's surrounded by an epithelial wall that secretes melanocytes. Sorry, it has melanocytes that secrete melanin. Melanin is a very interesting chemical. It absorbs heat, it absorbs electricity, it absorbs information, and it stays cool. It absorbs it forever. We can find melanin ink inside of some squids that are like 200,000 years old, and the ink is still liquid. It's like still in good shape. Melanin is probably one of the oldest chemicals that we've been able to find in deep space. Like seriously, it's a pretty interesting thing. Some people in the astrophysics community believe that dark matter and melanin are somehow related. There's something about this superconductor. It's used as for electrical conduits for circuitry, but in our case, for our discussion right now, it absorbs source information. Your eyes have melanocytes all in them, but more importantly, so do your ears. The inner ear, the cochlea, the parts that do not see the outside sun, have melanocytes inside them, and they secrete melanin. You and I have been told that melanin is here to pigment because of skin and because of the sun, and and it makes you racist. That's why. And that none of us have decided that melanin could be anything else. And I'm here to say that I really think that the hippocampus, the amygdala, utilize melanin as a clutch to stop seeing the world so clearly. That they have to stop seeing it because it's too intense, it gets too upsetting for them, and that they have to hide it from themselves. And that we hide ourselves from the world, believe it or not, by hiding the olfactory world, the smells, what we used to call aura. Some of us still do, but the idea of seeing someone's aura, in my opinion, is just seeing the smell cloud around them. And that we purposely either ran out of calories or chose to run out of calories. I could argue that later if we come to it, but that we've chosen to purposely hide most of the information from ourselves by burning the olfactory receptors the moment we're born. You can look this up. Children in the womb have much more resilient olfactory. As soon as you're born, it instantly starts to atrophy and it eventually goes away. So we're purposely squeezing and amputating one of the most vital signals that does not need to come into our frontal lobe, by the way. The olfactory goes straight into your sensory system, which means that you wouldn't be able to argue with smell. And we can't. This is why smelling salts work. This is why we find everyone universally finds the same noxious substances noxious. There's no mental way of hacking that. So a long time ago, we cut off the olfactory so we could create society. You're not going to be able to be in the same room with someone if you know for a fact that they're a psychopath or they just raped someone. But if you did go into a room and you could do that and cover your nose, you might be able to have dinner next to someone who did that and you still be able to digest food. So it's an advantage to knowing less is what I'm trying to say. Society needs us to know less. The psychopaths don't know less. They're able to take a shot this is theoretical, but they're able to take a shot that installs albinism inside their eyes. And the albinism is able to create their melanocytes to stop working. When you do this to an albino, they go fucking crazy. They have strobolism, this tensor strength with their eyes are constantly moving back and forth. They're not able to see as well. Most of the shamans in Africa were albinos. They're known to see things that others could not. And so my theory about the Black Eye Club is this. I'm sorry it's taking so long, Chris. Great. It's just that it's so much about the science is that I think that what's happening is that maybe there's a shot that could be given to the eye that would give it a temporary kind of albinism that would wear off after a while, basically numbing the melanocytes to where they think they're working, but they're not. And you would start to perceive a reality. I need to define perceive here, but you would start to see a reality that would otherwise be too hard for you to interpret. When I say see, though, I really need people to understand what vision is. The eye is a wound. It's not a window. It's bleeding information, but only because it hurts. So you're only going to be able to see as much reality as you can stomach, and it's hallucinated. I can prove this with blue. There are no blue receptors inside your fovea, yet we see a really rich blue, more than we should see. We hallucinate most of these things, and the hallucination is built in our amygdala by how comfortable it is with the truth we're seeing. So I'm talking about ghosts, poltergeist, auras, chemtrails, just the vibe, right? Just anyone's vibe at all. You would have more calories to render because you don't have this melanocyte clutch. Your amygdala saying, I don't like this reality. I just want to go to McDonald's and get fries, but that guy just diddled his kid, and I don't want to. It's that kind of thing. You have to shut it off. But the psychopath maybe would say, I need to see more. I need to see more, not less. And so this was my theory about the Black Eye Club. And now it's led to this book, which is actually having a lot to do with clones, believe it or not, because I think that cloning is an interesting part of how we understand our aperture, how much we limit source reality based on the amount of trauma we've had in the past. So a psychopath is made through generations where their aperture is stretched, their drum of consciousness is stretched more through trauma. And so they're able to normalize that more. So they're born into a life with a wider lens to see things. And so it gives them the advantage. So technically they have the advantage, but only because they suffered so much fucked up trauma in the past, which is why I say before, and I know a lot of people don't like this, I don't know if the elite psychopath is really the ultra predator that we think. I think it's a dangerous animal, but I think that they more of like an addict. They're not, I don't think they're going to survive long. And frankly, when you look at the Rockefellers and all the other families, these families fizzle out because they become too psychopathic. You're looking for a gardener that has a little bit more detachment. He's not so, I will be evil. He's more of just like, this is my garden, and we got some begonias, and then we got some black-eyed Susies, and these are poisonous and these aren't. You know, he'd look at it like that. There's no danger from the garden. Yeah. He's the fucking gardener. Nothing's there to kill him. So he doesn't have that same threat, the fantasy we have about the psychopath. They're not scared of us. We're literally helpless. We're literally harmless from their level. So it's a different kind of architecture.
Also, if you look at it from the angle that we were discussing earlier, how the psychopath rises to these positions of power and excels in the matrix, you couple that with the probability that they are using multi-generational trauma and abuse and mind control to perpetuate the psychopathy to future generations so that it can keep on going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is part of the haunting, the demonology, the necromancy I talk about, because ultimately your family line is a haunting. Your great-grandparents said, we stand for this. We're into grapes, or here's our family crest. What do we got? A unicorn and a bear. Okay, that's what we are. And that these are hauntings, archetypal hauntings, right, that have happened. And when you think about an elite family, let's say like Jared Kushner, I don't think that guy's having a good time. I think people probably hate hearing this. I don't think that guy's having a good time. He's literally married to Ivanka Trump. She probably fucking hates his guts. He probably feels like a raccoon that's broken into a giant mansion, and he's trying to make himself at home inside this tiny little master bedroom, and it's freezing cold. Like it's not a home is what I'm trying to say. It's a state that you reach when the addict is just simply just freaking out and they're trying to do too much. So in my mind, the people that are leading, we just don't see. Why do we not see? Because that's how good they are. They're so not good in like, don't worry, I'm not saying they're morally good, but like that's how good they are at being who they are, that we would never see them. But Joe Biden has his moments, his day, Donald Trump, from the moment from 5 a.m. until 10 at night, every single fucking minute is planned. He has to be here, he has to be here, he has to be here, then he has to be here. This is not a sign of an autonomous beyonder being that has power. This is the sign of someone that literally is having every single moment of their life dictated, like Taylor Swift. It's easy to think that Taylor Swift is having a better life than you. But it's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true. Do you understand? And in order for Taylor to do what she does, she would have to be a doper. I use this term loosely. But if you think about everyone that's successful, Lance Armstrong is part of the corona because he showed us. We just didn't want to see it. He showed us that, guys, stop thinking that it's just me. I'm telling you that everyone dopes. If you want to be an elite that everyone else sees, you're going to have to be psychopathic. And if you want to do that, you're going to have to break laws. You're going to have to do things no one else would do. And if you look in every single field, from politics to sports to psychology to literature to Hollywood, to every single sport, literally every single field ever, you will find at the top, it's full of psychopaths. Always. There's never an exception. Even if we look at the periodic table of the elements, there's psychopaths that have made up elements that did not exist and collected all this fame, and they found out later. Like, look up Novium. It's an example of this. So it's like, this is not we are in a point where we are not willing to admit how deep the psychopathy goes. So we create scarecrows, like we talked about earlier. We create candy corn versions of psychopaths. And I'm telling you, the psychopaths that you worry about are not candy corn. They are fucking driving right next to you. And they're in a fucking Toyota. They're in a fucking Toyota Corolla. Like that. That's how dangerous they are, because they're that close. But we don't want to see them. We want to see the scarecrow, because it makes us feel, when you're in bed at night and you look out and you see the scarecrow, you know where all the fear
Yeah.
is. You feel better, right? And this is the power, but this is what I mean. This shows you how creative we are. This is not a flaw. It shows you how fucking psychically creative we are. We are so psychically creative that we're building a fantasy on top of a fantasy that we already built 300 years ago and forgot. So we're fantasizing on top of the fantasy, on top of the fantasy, on top of the fantasy is all. And ultimately, this is who we are. I don't want us to go away from this. I want us to lean more into it. I think that we should start to utilize our fantasy more because this isn't a realm that's built for objectivity. Objectivity is something we declared from the realm because we watched the hypothetical, we watched the voice become God, that voice looked like objectivity, so we insisted everyone has to be seeing the same. We know for a fact that's not the case. We know for a fact that different people see different things. I have friends that see chemtrails, and I believe them. I think that they are hallucinating their reality the exact same way I am. I think that information that there are chemtrails is valuable data that's informing them about their environment. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't have to be accurate to be true. And this is so hard, I think, for people to picture. If you trust the hallucination, you realize it's never going to be accurate, but it still could be true.
Right on. This is fascinating. The last few minutes, I want to further explore this beyonder concept and help us understand what these people are. You said that most likely we're beyonders, the folks like us who are reaching beyond some of the normal understandings of the nature of reality and what we're really about. But there are also, what you're saying is very powerful beyonders that can rise above the psychopathy and still hold that level of power.
Yeah, I think that it's unavoidable that there have to be out there. And I think the best proof of that is if you look at consciousness, there was a time when autonomy, it's still happening now. Autonomy is sprouting. It's becoming more and more autonomous. And I think this is your clue that beyonders exist. I'm just going to use this as an example of self-employed people, just because I just need to pick something. And it's kind of has simple math, so I'll just say it that way. When I grew up, being self-employed was, I'm just going to make this up, maybe 7% of the people that you might know would grow up to be self-employed. Like it's a smaller number. It's a very elite field. I definitely think certain trades, you might be able to argue with me and say it's higher, but overall, self-employment has increased as consciousness has increased. When you are self-employed, you have a very different psyche. When I was employed at a job, like when I was in the Navy a long, long time ago, I looked at my day as I have to waste these hours until I can go home. Since 25, I've been self-employed, and I wake up and I'm like, fuck, how can I get more hours so I can get more done? It's a very different psychology. In my mind, I am a beyonder because of that self-employment. It's a loose thing, but it's like, and I'm a beyonder when I notice that voting, there's no way that could be legitimate.
Yeah.
I became a beyonder when I looked at Building 7 and I said, wait a minute, that can't be right. This is conscious of beyondering. And this is, people get so mad when I say this, but I still, if one of you hears this, I don't care if the rest of you get mad. I want you to hear this because I believe that Building 7 was placed here for you by beyonders who wanted you to see. These are perfect people that do perfect things. If you want to demo a building, even if you're not a psychopath, you're going to be able to exactly decide when that thing is going to go down. When you hit the button, there's trust me, people have been doing this a while. This is important. We're going to get the right people to do it. In my mind, the beyonders aren't showing us Building 7 because they're magnanimous and they're love and they're full of granola. I think it's more about the garden itself. I think that they look at the jungle and they're bored with how few of us are apex, with how few of us have reached that beyonder state. Keep in mind, if you're a beyonder, no one is a threat to you. Same if you're a psychopath. If you're truly a Rockefeller psychopath, why do we have to have this fantasy that they wake up every day to try and torture you and me? We're not a threat to them. We are literally the people that gave them all the power from day one and said, please give us petroleum and call it medicine. There's no threat from there. If anything, we've enabled them. So in my mind, the beyonder is someone who sees a need, has no fear at all of us waking up, sees an important need in the greenhouse itself expanding consciously. In my mind, this makes more sense because it would make a better garden. They're not doing it because they want to help you. They're doing it because they want to help them. There's nothing wrong with that. They want to see a richer garden that has not just craft beer. Right now, our lower societies, the pinnacle that we've done is we have craft beer. And maybe they want more. Maybe they want something a little bit higher caliber, not because they want to help us, but because it just makes the place more enjoyable to be around. If you were a psychopath a long time ago and you were taking over America, and I believe that Spain, Italy, France, and England did that. They're like, hey, there's a civilization there. We need to take them over. Let's pretend like that we're all exploring. And, this is, you're just watching how this works. But that as soon as they came to this land, the first thing they noticed is we don't have any fucking roads. How do I install a government? They don't even have a puppet government. We found Montezuma, but fuck, people in the Mississippi don't even know who he is. So we need an infrastructure. And so the psychopaths would want that infrastructure to be built the same way the beyonders would want the conscious infrastructure to be built too. It's like, guys, we need to raise this up a little bit. Let's get some roads in here. Let's get a gas station or two, right? Let's have a society where me as a psychopath, I can travel around, right? And integrate and access any point here, just as I would my garden. It's no different than saying, I want to put a garden here. Let's get rid of all the briars so I can walk around, right? So even the psychopath is helping. Here's what's hard for people to see. I think the psychopath is a tool of nature. It's a very important tool of nature. It's a honey badger of people, It's like this one little species. It's like, what the fuck? It's like, I know I'm a honey badger, but I'm important. And you may not know exactly why it's important, but it is. So it's sort of like a clearing, it's teaching discernment all the time. This is why I believe this realm is perfect. Psychopaths teach you discernment all the time. All they do is teach you you're not paying enough attention. That's all they do. So really what they do is they waken us up. They dilate us. Psychopaths dilate you the same way a jaguar dilates you. The jungle gave you the jaguar so you would wake up. If you could start to sense more than one color, you'd be able to see the jaguar. And a long time ago, I don't think that we have the full colors we have now. I can show you how the rainbows changed. That from Da Vinci to Newton, that Newton was like, no, it's 5 colors. And then you got Da Vinci like, no, it's 7. I can show you cultures that have still, to this day, have not invented the word blue yet, wow. Chris. I'm not making that up. I could show you Gladstone and the work of language that proves definitively that for example, in the Iliad, a giant story about a boat on the water underneath the sky, dude never says the word blue. Not once. Uses the word blue. Why? Because consciousness did not have the timbre to see blue. It did not have the hallucinatory mental aspects to see blue. And if you look at the fovea of the eyes, you're not going to see any blue cones in there, which means that blue is a hallucination. We literally have to paint it there. But we can only paint it there when we have enough dopamine, i.e. the gas pedal I was talking about, for your eyes to do that. But we only have enough of that if we have a giant tumor, literally, on our frontal lobe. That Homo sapien is, the first sapien is Homo with a tumor. And then Homo sapien is Homer with a tumor that has a tumor on top of it. And that second tumor is the awareness of ourselves, which is just the conscious architecture that we need to start to interpret visual signal as color inside of our retina. It's not even visual then, it's signal that we interpret as color, because if we shade it into different colors, we can discern it and we can say those are roses, those are tulips, right? This is squash. It informs us through hallucination. It's not the reality that's telling us this, Chris. It's our hallucination of the reality that is so well done that we allowed to call it reality because it's the best thing that we have that works.
Right on. I love it, man. This is fantastic information. Before you go, is there any new projects upcoming, anything you've been working on that you'd like to share?
As I said, Black Eye Club is a book I wrote a long time ago, but I've rewritten it. I've just been able to put more time into it. So that's coming out really soon. I would love it if people would check that out and see what they think. And otherwise, I do a live stream here on YouTube, and I do what's called a dojo. So we actually meet and talk about cool stuff. So if anyone's looking for that kind of like mental flavor, you should check me out. Just Google James True. You should be able to find me there. You can join my Patreon for free if you want. That way you could just, keep track of what I'm doing and, see these invites and more about my book and other ideas like
Excellent. James, thank you so much. Definitely have to do this
that. Oh,
again.
absolute pleasure.
Always love our
I'd
conversations.
love to, Chris. Yeah.
Excuse me. Before you go, the website once more is jtrue.com.
That's right, jtrue.com.
Perfect.
That's
I'll
right.
have that in the description. And until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We'll talk again tomorrow.